As an attorney for over 15 years, I bring to you the new Legal Hour, where you will hear from top attorneys and judges in areas such as family law, personal injury, child support and custody, trademarks, probate, and so much more. Join us every Tuesday at 12 noon on Facebook Live or YouTube Live to get the answers to general legal questions that you may have. And don't forget to subscribe to our new legal YouTube channel at Attorney Tamika Johnson. And for more information about our firm services, visit johnsonlawpractice.com today.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is the Legal Hour, where every Tuesday at noon, it's about 12:03 today, but very close to noon Eastern Standard Time, we are joined by attorneys, judges, other legal professionals to talk about just different areas of law, with them giving you tips and resources in their legal areas of expertise. I am your host, Tamika Michelle Johnson, estate planning attorney in Georgia, specializing in wills, trusts, healthcare directives, power of attorneys, deeds, uncontested probates. For more information about my services, you can always visit the website at johnsonlawpractice.com. Our guest today, attorney Danielle Bess with South Atlanta Injury Attorneys, will be talking about something that I say is not sexy, but it's necessary, especially when we get in those situations. So auto accidents, personal injury, insurance coverage. If you have a question, if you're tuning in, be sure to put it in the chat and I will ask Attorney Bess about your personal injury question. So I'm going to let Attorney Bess introduce herself, her practice areas, and what we'll be focusing on this hour. So Attorney Bess, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
And thank you very much, Tamika. I'm happy to be here. As you said, I am a personal injury attorney. I practice in Metro Atlanta. We handle cases throughout the state of Georgia. And we focus on making sure injured people who've been injured through no fault of their own, that they can get the just compensation that they deserve. So sometimes that's car accidents, sometimes it's slip and fall, sometimes it's nursing home negligence and abuse, and sometimes crime victims. So those are some of the areas that we focus on. But our goal is to make sure our clients are treated fairly with dignity and respect, and to make sure they are fairly compensated for injuries.
Absolutely. So I have Attorney Bess's website scrolling at the bottom of the page. So it's South Atlanta Injury Attorneys.com. So be sure to visit her there. Again, for the other areas, especially nursing home injuries due to wrongful death
Absolutely.
cases. Okay.
Yes,
So all those areas, be sure to check out Attorney Bess's firm. So before we get into the realm of insurance, just full disclosure, when it comes to insurance, I feel like so many other people do, right? That it's very expensive. We rarely use it. And when we do, it's like pulling teeth trying to get insurance companies to come through. So even as an attorney, the personal injury cases I've done like a couple dozen of them, but I don't consider myself a personal injury expert. I don't even do them anymore. But even in cases where we've gotten like over $100,000 checks and payments from an insurance company, the client still was not made whole. And that's because their injuries exceeded the policy limits on both sides, whether it's, their side, we don't want to have to use our insurance, for backup, but on the other person's side. But you want to make sure that you do have those coverages. So just kind of take us through a situation when someone is in an accident of no fault of their own, what happens next, and the basic process of when someone is injured in a car accident, whether they're at fault or not.
Okay, so let's talk insurance, because it is so important in determining how your case is going to be resolved and how you are going to leave feeling about the entire process. And I'll talk a little bit about what happens when someone is injured. But first, before there's any car accident, before, of course, all of us drive around, we hope that nothing happens, and we can't imagine anything happening. Before any type of injury, you need to have proper insurance in place. So in Georgia, if you're hit by a car, there are a couple of things that could happen. The person who hit you could have no insurance. That means there's no coverage for you for your medical expenses, no coverage for you for your car to be repaired. And if that happens, then you would have to turn to your insurance to determine whether you had coverage. And that's called uninsured motorist coverage. And we'll talk about that. The second thing that could happen is that the person has the basic minimum policy for Georgia. And in Georgia, you only have to have $25,000 in coverage. So if you're in an accident with someone, they only have $25,000. If you go to the hospital by ambulance from the scene, if you break a bone, if it's anything remotely serious, that $25,000 is easily going to be eaten up. The third thing that could happen is you're hit by someone, or injured by someone, and they have adequate coverage. They may have, a $500,000 policy, $1 million policy, but the average person does not have a policy that large. In trucking accidents, you will see the trucking companies, they have to have a minimum of $750,000, but most individuals don't carry that type of coverage. So if you are in those first two categories, no insurance, or what we call you're being hit by an underinsured person, then your remedy is to look at your insurance policy and determine whether or not you have what's called uninsured motorist coverage or underinsured motorist coverage. And it works the same way. And so I printed out a policy so that you could, people could see it. And I don't know if you can see it at all. Can you?
Not really. Bring it up a little bit closer. Kind of make it like a little straighter. Yeah. And we can almost see it. Bring it up a little bit closer. Yeah, right there.
Okay. So if you can see on this policy, it's a minimum policy, $25,000. And it says $25.50. So the 25 is the amount that can be paid to any one individual in the car who's injured. The 50,000 is for the entire accident. So if there's one person in the car, they can be paid 25,000. If there are two people in the car, each could receive 25,000. If there are three people in the car, you start having to divide that total pot of 50,000. If there are four people, there's even more dividing going on. They have property damage of up to 25,000. And then it says uninsured motorist, BI add-on. And so that says 25 also, for a total of 50. So that's important. And it also says add on. So that's important because it tells us if this person is in an accident, the other driver did not have sufficient insurance, they potentially have another $25,000 that could be added to whatever to help compensate them. And it would be added on to whatever else they've already received. So that's how the uninsured motorist policy works. I would not recommend somebody get $25,000 in uninsured motorist coverage. Personally, I believe I have like 300,000 because at that point, it's depending on my insurance to make sure I'm made whole if the other person doesn't have adequate coverage. And a lot of times we have clients who are seriously injured. There's in fact, we've had cases where there was death and there's only a $25,000 policy. And that is a very difficult conversation to have with a family, that there's only 25,000. And, they will say immediately, well, can we sue them? Can we sue this person? And we will explain that, yes, we can sue the person, but we've done a search of their assets. They don't have any. They have a house with a mortgage on it. They have cars that have liens on them. There's no money. So, and if there's no no uninsured motorist coverage, then that's it. That's $25,000, and there's nothing else to recover.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so I can say, so just for clarification, so people know, especially here in Georgia, so we're both in Georgia, the is required.
No, UM
It's
is
not required. It's
not at
not
all.
required. Okay.
It is something that you have to opt out of. So when you sign up for your insurance policy, you should be offered in Georgia. And if you decline it, there's a waiver that you have to sign. So that makes it legal for the insurance company not to include it. So most days, the insurance companies are pretty proficient in making sure if you don't want it, you waive it, and that's the end of the issue. But it's not required at all.
Okay. Let me ask this question. In your experience with the clients that you've had, how often do you see that you have a client, they were not at fault, but the other person that hit them who was at fault does not or did not have insurance?
Oh my goodness, we see it way too often. I would say about 25% of the cases that come into our office is a shockingly high number of people who are driving around totally uninsured. And in that category, I add people who are excluded from policies. So they may be in a household with either parents or significant other, and that person is excluded from the insurance, but yet they're still driving the car. So yeah, so it happens so often, and I always thought I don't have insurance. I'm immediately reported to some agency, and that might happen, but it's not very effective in making sure people get insurance and keep insurance.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about being excluded from insurance. Tell us a little bit how that happens, because I think people assume that if you're in a car and it's insured, and the insurance company calls it, did you give them permission or, what have you? Can they, I guess claim under or get coverage from the insurance company? So how is it that people are excluded from insurance policies?
So, there are some people who may have a driving history, DUIs, other things in their driving record that make them high risk individuals and makes insurance coverage for them very costly. So in order to avoid that cost being shifted to me, I might decide I'm going to exclude this person from my policy, because when we call Geico, Allstate, they will ask, well, who's in your household? Who are the drivers? Will they be driving your car? Then they start to give us quotes. And if I tell you that, this person is in my household, they have a DUI, a couple of DUIs, very bad driving history, and my insurance is going to triple or quadruple, I may decide I don't want them covered. And that way they're excluded. And there's a statute that says that person who's excluded has to sign a waiver, so that they know they're excluded. And so that's usually how it happens, how people come to be excluded. And when that happens, they should not be driving your car, because they are not going to be covered if there's an accident. But people take chances. People, we're in Atlanta. We don't have a public transportation that's so robust that we don't need a car. So people take chances. They, get in the car, they drive, they hope nothing happens. And then when something does happen, there's, somebody's left in a situation where their expenses may not be covered in the future.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a hypothetical. So let's say I'm here. I have a cousin who is coming to stay with me for a couple weeks, but you know how that goes. A couple weeks usually ends up being a little bit more than that, right? So they're there for, let's say at this point, 2 months. and they happen to use my car to go to the store. They're in an accident. Have you seen a situation where this person's in the house, now they're there past 30 days, whatever it is, and they're in an accident and they want to claim my insurance, but I didn't call the insurance company to say, oh, well, this person is here. Are there any requirements that I call the insurance company and say, okay, this person's living with me in order to add them to the insurance? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So every insurance policy is a contract, and the contracts differ from person to person. What my insurance policy looks like may be very different from yours. And when I called Geico to change my policy a few years ago, I said to them, I have a daughter who is a driver, but she does not live in Georgia. She lives out of state. Do I need to add her to my policy? Because she comes home for holidays and to visit, and she may be home as long as 6 weeks, 2 months. Do I need to add her to my policy? And they told me, no, you don't need to add her. So she's a permissive driver. She's not someone who's driving my car all the time. So in most situations like that, no, you're not going to be required to include that person on your policy.
Okay. And so I think that it's really important just to make sure that people are making those calls, because I have had a situation. It wasn't me personally, but the example that I gave, because, I always use, real life examples. But the example that I gave, it was someone who had a visitor, who was supposed to be there for like 3 months. And just, out of caution, the policy owner called the insurance company saying, do I need to have coverage for this person? She may drive my car every once in a while, but not often. And they said yes. And, she was like, I don't want to add her. She doesn't, this person has like a suspended license and all that. And so now they're being affected. So, I mean, it's important to know your insurance company said, no, you don't need to, but, other insurance companies may say, yeah, someone's there for a certain period of time, they need to be added to the policy.
And that's a good point. And it's that insurance policy is a contract, and your contract may be different from my contract. So call your insurance policy. In fact, I recommend that every year you call your auto insurance provider and you go over your policy limits, you go over your coverage, who is covered, who is not covered, who's excluded, if anyone, so that you absolutely know and there are no surprises. Because, I mean, for me, being on the attorney end, I do this because I want to help people. And when people come in our office and we're like, we can't help you, there's nothing we can do because of insurance, it's really heartbreaking. We had a young man, in his 20s, I think he was only 24 years old, broke his hip in a car accident. And the other driver was an excluded driver, and there was no coverage. And of course, the family wants to know, well, can we sue them? Of course we can sue them, but they don't have anything. Right. So we don't want to end up with go through the years of litigation, the cost of litigation, and we end up with a judgment that can't be enforced.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard because, especially just taking where we are right now with inflation and everything just being up, people are trying to cut costs every way that they can. So it's hard to make those assessments and those choices. But at the end of the day, if we're not using it, fine. But, in the chance that something does happen, it's important to be protected. Okay. So let's go through, someone has been hurt in an accident, the process at the point when they come to you. What does the process look like?
Okay. So when people come to us, the first thing we want to know is there a police report? And sometimes it's very tempting at the scene to just exchange information. We'll just exchange driver insurance information, driver's license. That's very, very risky because the story could change as soon as that person drives off. If the police is not there to document what happened, what they say happened at the time, we see it all the time. We have a client who was hit from the rear, clear rear end damage to his car. And the other driver is now saying, oh, no, I wasn't at fault. I'm not responsible. And the insurance company is denying liability. So number one, call the police. Have an independent report. And also, we have our cell phones. If you, for whatever reason, decide you cannot wait for the police to show up, you don't want to call the police, you better pull out your phone and start recording so that you have some independent proof that what this person is saying today is what they're going to be saying 3 months from now, a year from now. So the next thing is we want to make sure if you are injured, you've been checked out. So many people leave an accident, they start having pain, and they decide they're not going to go to the doctor. They don't go to urgent care, the emergency room, they don't call their doctor. They just decide to tough it out. And then a couple of weeks later, they find that the injuries have progressed. They're feeling even worse. And they finally need some type of treatment, and they've received the treatment a few weeks later. And guess what? The insurance company says, well, you didn't go to the doctor when this happened. So how do we know something didn't happen in the 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever between the accident and you actually going to the doctor?
Right.
So we want you to seek treatment as soon as possible. And go ahead.
Okay, let me ask a quick question, because some people are reluctant in going to the hospital because hospital bills can be really, really high. Do you have a preference or suggestion for people, whether they go to the ER, urgent care, or their doctor? Because a lot of times people have insurance. If they wait like a day, they can go to their doctor. Is there any preferred provider in that instance?
So I wouldn't say there's a preferred provider. It's important that you be seen as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I was in a car accident 2 years ago. I was sitting at a red light, and a big work hit the back of me. He said his brakes went out, and he slammed into the back of me, and I hit the car in front of me. And I was far from home, and I didn't want to be transported to the hospital in that location. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and my kids came, got me, and I went to my primary care physician because they had openings. If they had not had openings, I would have gone to urgent care or an emergency room. If you have insurance, you should ask your insurance to bill. And I had this problem. My insurance company, the hospital, the facility, they did not want to bill my insurance because they said it was an accident. And so that's a huge problem in Georgia and a lot of other places. There was actually a big article about this, how the facilities, they will not bill the insurance company. They want to wait for your personal injury claim to be resolved. But you should really insist, I want my insurance company billed. This is an injury. This is a valid claim. There's no reason why. Put it in writing if you have to. But you definitely want to be seen as quickly as possible. And you asked if I had a preference. And actually, my preference is seeing my personal provider, because that person has more of a history. They have all of my records, but it's more difficult to get in and see your personal provider on the same day of an accident.
Okay. And so is the rationale, as far as the medical providers not wanting to bill the insurance, is because they'll get more on the insurance side? Okay.
Absolutely. It's all about money for them. How much money they can get. With the insurance company, they're getting discounts. They're not paying the insurance company is not paying full value. But from me and you, if we have to pay out of pocket out of a recovery, they're charging us a very different amount.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So you're hurt. You went to go see your provider. What's next? And you are injured. What's next after that?
So we want to make sure you continue to treat for your injuries and be consistent with treating, because the insurance companies have all kinds of little tricks that they use to say your claim is not valid. if you don't consistently treat, they'll say, well, you couldn't have been that injured. You didn't consistently treat. If you consistently treat, well, why were you treating so much? It shouldn't have taken all of this for you to be well. So either way, the insurance company is going to have an argument about why they shouldn't acknowledge and, fully compensate you. But we want you to get well. So our goal is not just for you to treat for the sake of treating. We want you to, at the end of the day, to be back where you started as much as possible, to be in the same or better physical condition. So we want you to treat consistently. And once you get to the end of your treatment, then we will start a process of trying to resolve your claim. And that includes us sending what we call a demand to the insurance company. And we explain to them the injury based on the medical records, the bills that you've incurred, lost wages that you may have incurred, any future injury or treatment that you're going to need. And we include all of that, and we tell them that we believe this claim is worth X. And so our demand is that they pay that amount. And depending on the type of case it is, sometimes they will accept the demand. Sometimes they will try to negotiate based on the demand. Sometimes they will deny liability. They'll say our client isn't even responsible for these injuries or the accident. So they completely deny liability. And based on their response, then we know how we need to respond.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna go back just a little bit, then I'm gonna come back around. So I know the important part, the meat of it really is to get that treatment, the consistent treatment. And people kind of like, well, am I going to a chiropractor? Am I going to a physical therapist? Just talk a little bit about that, because so many people are kind of like, okay, initial treatment is either like every day or every other day. And people are like, well, I have to go to work. I've got kids and I have all of this. What do you tell people when they, have those treatment plans? What to do in that situation? Because, we're people, but at the same time, the insurance company is like, oh, well, you didn't go, as if you didn't go because you didn't want to. It's just, we're women, we do what we have to do.
That's right.
Yeah. So what do you tell the client? How do you get them to?
This is what we tell the client. When you go, whether it's a chiropractor or physical therapy, so we tell them to talk with your provider. Your provider will tell you what the injuries are. They will give a recommended schedule. You need to tell them up front what your life situation is. And we don't want you to have a treatment plan that says you're going to treat every day for the next 6 weeks when you're in school and you have to, be in school all day, and that's just not going to work. And most of the providers, they will work with you. They will help come up with a treatment plan that will work with your life circumstances. So we want you to, tell them what the situation is. We recommend that clients go to treatment providers who are convenient to them, who are close to them or their house or their job, so that they can get there. Some people go during their lunch break or early in the morning before they go to work or before they go home. We want to make sure whatever the treatment plan is, you can actually adhere to it. And you asked about chiropractors versus physical therapy. It really depends. We work with some fantastic chiropractors. People rave about the chiropractors that they see. They tell us this, the chiropractor really helped my injuries, really got me back on my feet. A lot of people go well after the injury, just as a maintenance or preventive process. So it just really depends. But there are some injuries that are better suited for a physical therapist. So we let the medical professionals figure out what the best treatment is. We're not doctors. We don't know. So that your doctor can recommend physical therapy. They can recommend a chiropractor. And they are in the best position to know who you need to see.
Right. So tell us the cases a little bit about which ones you actually settle, and then the ones you actually go to court on. What those cases kind of
Okay.
look like, how they differentiate.
So first of all, if we accept a case in our office, when we start preparing that case, it's with the mindset that we will have to litigate this case, meaning go to court with the case. So we treat all cases like that from the very beginning. Uh, and we're not a firm that will only settle a case. You know, we will file a lawsuit. We are trial lawyers. We will litigate your case. But what, in my experience, what we find, the cases that settle during the demand phase, they're the cases with very serious injuries, and we make a demand, and the insurance company is going to recognize these are serious injuries. We're going to go ahead and pay the policy limits or pay the demand, and they're going to resolve the case. And then the cases that where there's not a lot of injury, a lot of times the clients, you know, they don't want to have to file a lawsuit. So they will instruct us, you know, can you go ahead and resolve this for me? The cases where we have to litigate, they're usually those cases where there's not a lot of car damage and they are only what we call soft tissue injuries. So there's no herniated disc, there's no fractures or anything like that. And the insurance company, they have a policy. So it's not as though they don't know the seriousness of this claim, but there's a policy and there's lots of information out there about this, that they kind of lowball those types of claims because they're in the business of saving money. And, you know, lowballing those claims is part of their process. You know, there's so many of us who have really negative views about personal injury cases. You think people who think attorneys who handle these cases were ambulance chasers. They think people are faking, making things up. And the insurance companies know that. And so they use that to their advantage. And they can lowball those cases. So we end up having to file lawsuits. And, you know, if they can't give us, you know, fair offer, we're prepared to file a lawsuit and to, pursue it for our client in court.
Now, do you find that even those soft tissue injury cases that they're worth it to go to court? Do you find that you do that often? Because insurance companies, they're not trying to pay anything if possible. Are some of them really valid and worth it to go to court on the soft tissue injury cases?
I would say most of the cases are valid. I mean, they're valid from our perspective in that our client has been injured, they received treatment, it was through no fault of their own, and they should be fairly compensated. So if the insurance company, for instance, somebody is injured in a low impact accident, there's not a lot of damage to the vehicle, visible damage to the vehicle, and the client starts having neck and back pain, and they receive treatment for that, they have maybe $8,000 worth of treatment. So if we try to settle their case and the insurance company says, oh, we'll give you $5,000. Now, that doesn't sound fair to me. $5,000, $8,000 in treatment. We don't charge our clients a fee until we resolve their case. So our fee comes out of whatever we recover. So they're paying us, they're paying their bills. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure they are fairly compensated. So we find that our lawsuits, we tend to get, in most cases resolved. Even after we file the lawsuit, they resolve before trial. And we find that we get better results after we file the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. So, there are so many people, if they do get in an accident and they're not severely injured, meaning they don't have anything broken or something like that, or maybe more so soft tissue. They're like, oh, I don't want to go to an attorney. All the attorney's fees, they're going to take everything out of my settlement check, or what have you. I'll get less money. What caution do you give to people in proceeding with a personal injury case on their own versus having an attorney?
So we totally respect people who want to pursue it on their own, but there are some things you definitely need to look out for. So the very early stages of a case, the insurance adjuster is going to call the one who's handling the personal injury part. They are going to call, and they may seem very friendly. How are you doing? And as soon as you say, "Oh, I'm fine," well, in their head and in their records, I spoke to this person on August 2nd. They had no injuries. So they may even ask you for a recorded conversation, and they will ask you similar questions. Well, how are you doing? Do you feel like you need treatment? So they're kind of locking in your story. They're locking in, what you're saying very early on. So if you start having pains 3 or 4 days later, they're going to be stuck on the fact that you've already told them you're not injured. So number one, be careful when you're talking to the insurance adjuster, because they are not your friend. They're not your ally. They are an employee of the insurance company, and they have the insurance company's interests at heart. Number two, make sure you know what the statute of limitations is. You have to file your claim within a certain period of time. Now, when you are in an accident, 2 years from now, from that date, feels like a long time, but the insurance company can really jerk you around for 2 years before they pay anything. And as soon as that 2-year mark passes, you no longer have a valid claim that you can pursue against the insurance company. So you need to be very careful. And number three, make sure you know what all of your damages are. So if you are injured on August 2nd and you settle your case on August 5th, and you have medical appointments after that, those medical appointments are not going to be covered. And this, may seem like unlikely scenarios, but they happen all the time. Especially with young people. The insurance adjuster will say, "Oh, I'll give you, $2,500. Well, that sounds very attractive to immediately get $2,500. And, we had a friend whose son was in an accident. The insurance adjuster said, "I'll give you $1,500 for the accident." He got and he also said, "And we'll take care of your medical bills." Well, when he signed for the $1,500, he waived his right to any further compensation. So he did have additional medical bills, but the insurance company wouldn't honor those bills. So you have to be very careful and make sure you are resolving your case at a point where you know what all your damages are.
Right. And so it's just important to reiterate, before you sign anything, if you are not familiar with the language, what's going on, what it says, what it means, despite what anybody says, despite what the insurance company says, make sure someone looks at it. If you feel like you want to go without an attorney. And, it's also important for people to know, I don't know if this resonates with anyone, but they have different adjusters for whether you have an attorney, you don't have an attorney. So if you go in, you don't have an attorney, there's one adjuster. But once they get a letter from an attorney, they switch adjusters because it's a different process. They know that they can get over on people if they don't have an attorney.
Yeah.
So I know that you are not an insurance company agent or adjuster or anything like that, but I do want to talk about policies just a little bit. Maybe like the importance of Medpay and how you see that's beneficial for your clients and what that means at the end of the day as far as what they receive.
So Medpay, we didn't talk about that earlier, but Medpay is another benefit that you can have on your policy that provides for medical coverage. So you can have $2,500. We most often see like $1,000, occasionally $5,000. And that money goes towards any medical expenses you have. So that's an additional benefit. We don't have to wait until your case is resolved for you to get your Medpay. And it can go directly to the medical provider. So it's one of those nice and important benefits that you can have on your policy. And a lot of times, we will suggest to the client, give this, let's pay the provider directly so that, your medical coverage can continue, your treatment can continue uninterrupted.
Right. And then definitely check with your state and insurance company, because I think I had one for someone who had a policy that was out of state, and it was like 10,000 Medpay, which was great. She had a great policy, but it does vary. Usually it's like, about 1,500, 2,500, not, significant, but when you go up a little bit higher, definitely makes an impact at the bottom line. And so here's another thing that I ran into, because, and you probably do it, but most people are like, okay, I'm injured and I need to do something with my car. And then the first thing that I'm thinking, well, okay, I know, it's too technical. Well, we're doing your personal injury. We're not doing your property damage. I mean, it just so happened, I would always help out if I could. But just kind of tell the difference to anyone who's listening, the difference between the property damage, your car, and then the personal injury side of it where you come in.
Absolutely. So the property damage is usually handled by a completely different adjuster. And we tell our clients, you can talk to that adjuster about your car and getting it repaired. And we try to give our clients enough information so that they can handle the property damage portion of it on their own. In fact, we have a little resource book that we give them about the property damage process, and so that they can make sure their car is repaired as quickly as possible. If we need to step in and assist, we will. And our paralegals, they are trained on how to talk to the insurance providers, the claims adjusters, about the property damage. But some of the trends that we're seeing in regards to property damage, are very, unsettling. So one of the things we're seeing is that some of the big insurance companies are not paying for rental coverage up front. So they are requiring the person who through no fault of their own has been in an accident, they are requiring them to rent a car, and they will reimburse them. So not everyone is in a position to rent a car. And the other issue that's going on right now is getting parts. We've had clients tell us that, they're going to repair my car, but they're saying they can't get the part. And, that's all part of COVID and all the problems with the supply chain. So can you imagine you're in a car accident, it's not your fault, and the insurance company and the other party's insurance company says, we're not renting a car for you, but we'll reimburse you. Right. And you don't have, the means to rent a car. So that's been a big issue. And, there have been some cases where, we argue, oh, no, they need a car. We push back and they provide a car. But in some instances, that's their policy and they're not changing it. But
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but, we want to make sure the remedy to that is you having coverage on your policy. So you can have your insurance policy can cover a rental car in case you're in an accident. So that's really the best remedy, instead of having to fight with the insurance company and rely on them doing the right thing.
Okay, I should just be quiet because that's the question I was going to ask anyway. As far as just, utilizing your rental reimbursement or coverage on your own policy, because the other party's insurance company won't pay. So I think we have all the basics. Do you have anything you want to add to the process, or any other tips or suggestions you want to give to people when it comes to them being involved in an accident?
So my suggestion is be patient. The process can take a while. We try to move it as quickly as possible, but be patient and make sure you're documenting. And when I had my accident, it was, things were kind of a blur. Things went really fast, but my office has a little journal. And I just started, and we tell our clients, make sure you're documenting how you're feeling what's going on with you. Video, take pictures so that we have some, proof of what's going on. And that kind of kicked in when I was injured. And there was this strange thing started happening to me. I started having spasms in my muscle spasms that you could physically see. And it kept happening after the accident. And one day I was sitting there and I was like, I should be videotaping this, but it took a while, took a few days actually for me to remember to do that. And I took out my camera and I started videotaping, and you could actually see the muscle, spasm happening. And there's a big difference between telling somebody, oh, I had a muscle spasm versus here's the video of this muscle spasm. So, try to document, keep a journal, how you're feeling, take pictures. And the other thing is we find that a lot of people minimize their injuries. They don't want to be complainers. They don't want people to think they're whining. And so they don't always tell the doctor exactly everything that's going on with them. And they will then tell us, and we will say, well, we don't see it in your medical records. What happened? And I didn't, tell the doctor. I didn't think it was important. I want to focus on, this other part of my injury. You need to tell your doctor everything, from head to toe. You need to tell them everything that's a problem for you.
Yeah. And I do want to stress the importance of being patient. Just from personal experience, I think I was 25, 3 days before I had my daughter, before I gave birth to her. I was in an accident, leaving the hospital, and was in an accident. Somebody came out in front of me. They were at fault. But I hit my knee, but I didn't know I hit my knee. And then 3 days later, I was in labor and I had my daughter. So there was lots of things going on. But at the time, I was going back to law school. I was like, I can use this money. I can use this check. And, I went through treatment. But I settled. And then for the next 10 years, every time, once a month, when my cycle came, I'd get this pain in my knee. And so had I just waited it out, just even a year, I was in a rush. I settled it quickly within months. Had I waited out just to kind of see, what impact those injuries would have, I would have noticed that. Because I had that for a good amount of time. So definitely, be patient. I know we're all in a situation, inconvenience. But yeah, patience is definitely needed in those situations. So thank you so much for coming on. Very, very informative. I've got to have you back on for the nursing home incidences. Because I know I have had calls about that and didn't have an attorney to go to refer them to, but just knowing a little bit more about that. And I don't know how common it is that you're seeing those things, but I can imagine that can be an issue and heartbreaking as well.
Very, very heartbreaking. It's a tough decision when your parent or family member goes into a nursing home, and we see some of the most horrific neglect in nursing homes. And there's certain types of neglect that we see that as soon as we see it and hear it, we know it's only because of neglect. People in nursing homes, they should not have, they shouldn't have bed sores. Bed sores is a sign of neglect. That means they're not properly turning the person like they should. So I would definitely love to talk with you about that. It's one of those areas that, we're very passionate about, nurse justice for people in nursing homes. These are our grandmothers, our aunts, people who we want them to live the rest of their lives with dignity. Right. And they're robbed of that when they're not properly taken care of.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. But thank you so much for all of the personal injury and insurance information. Very, very informative. And next week, we will have on attorney Paige, who will be talking about trademarks. So for anyone who is an entrepreneur or they have something they want to trademark, that would be a good session, something I don't know a lot about. So I look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a good afternoon. Thanks again, Attorney Bess.
You're welcome. Thanks.